This last month of June was quite revolutionary for my content consumption because I tried to lower down my digital content consumption and try to read more books. And as I'm planning some of my research at the moment, it is quite helpful for me to read, because then I can write some of the stuffs that I'm writing very more efficiently. So this month I have read 6 or 7 books, which is, I think, quite a nice number. It is more than a book for a week. I think that's quite a nice... I'm not going to say start, because I think that's a good, level of books that I read on a regular basis. That I can keep up with that number. I think more than one for a week is, I think, a good measure of books to read. And I think I am thankful for a new habit of mine that I have started this month also, and that was to read 2 books at the same time. One of them was my communing book, which was quite lighter to read, and the second one was that I read when I was sitting down, or when I had time to digest what it was saying, what was written on there. And this method really helped me to read way more books than I usually do, because I was quite busy with work as well this month. So it was quite a nice way to, use my time very efficiently. Not that I have to be efficient, but instead of, scrolling through reels or videos, I suppose, it was quite nice to touch some paper and read what was written on them. And it was a nice month because of that, and because I was also at the hospital quite frequently. Many people saw me with many different books this month, which became a new thing, and people started to ask about the books that I have read. In fact, actually, the topics that these books are in, the topics are quite interesting. So I also want to talk about them, which I have done with some of my colleagues, and which I have also done with 2 of my friends through some videos. I'm not consuming more digital content, but I'm creating more, which is, I don't know, it's at least intellectual, isn't it? So I have made 2 videos. It was 4, because I tried to send it through a message, and the messaging app only let me to make videos of 10 minutes, so I had to do 2. So that means I already have made 35 minutes of videos about the books that I have read this month, which is exciting. So I have rehearsed this video beforehand, and I wanted to do this make this into a YouTube video, because I wanted to really talk about the things that these books were about, because as I said, they were quite interesting. One of the reasons why the topics were interesting is because I didn't really read fiction this month, which was a new thing. And the reason that I have read more books this month is because I finally accepted the fact that I can't read fiction anymore. They don't interest me anymore. So I finally accepted this new thing about myself and read more theoretical books, which was way more fun, actually, because there is one fiction book that I will mention in this video, which summarizes my reason of not reading fiction books. And I have 2 disclaimers in this video to make. First of all, this is not an ad. I'm not sponsored. I'm not promoting any of these books. If you want to, you can read, of course, but I'm not paid. I bought these books myself. I paid I paid the bill myself, and yeah, there is not an ad. I'm not getting any financial aid through this video. And the second point is that when I was taking notes, taking the names of the books as a list, I realized that there were many words that I could mispronounce, because there is a wide array of cultures in this list, which is nice to see, but I don't think I'm going to pronounce all of them correctly, so please forgive me in advance for not pronouncing any of them correctly. But I will put a picture of the book as well on the screen, so you can understand what the book is or who's the writer. Because the name of one is in German. I didn't read it in German, but it's Freud. It's his book about narcissism. We will get into that. Anyways, so the first book that I have started and finished in this month, because the beginning of the month I was reading something from last month. I cannot say the name of that book. It was Emile Durkheim, and it's his longest book, I suppose. It's quite a long read, but it was I have read that quite fast. It was an easy read, at least. One of Emile Durkheim's books was the first book that I have read and finished this month. So the second book that I have read this month, but the first book that I have started this month, is Travelers to Unimaginable Lands by, please forgive me, what does it say? Dasha Keeper or Dasha Kuiper. I hope it is Dasha at least. Anyways, Travelers to Unimaginable Lands. I think the picture is going to be somewhere around me. So this book was actually very inspiring and eye-opening. The book is about dementia and actually the caregivers of dementia patients and what they go through as their loved ones go through this disease and try to sort their lives through the lens of dementia. While the patient is doing that, what is happening to the caregiver? Which is quite an interesting topic, but it's also a very important topic because we also study dementia and their caregivers quite a lot in our hospital. My thesis is about the caregivers of terminally ill patients, and this book was very eye-opening. It was mainly these stories of patients that the writer has seen themselves, and the stories are told in a way that they each spotlight a fact about dementia and how it can affect the caregiver. Because as we progress in neuroscience and as we learn more about human brain and how it functions, we now know that mirror neurons work very dominantly in a person's daily life, and this book is talking about how that can be affected when a patient is dealing with a problem that is causing their understanding of their surroundings to, warp and to be disturbed. When someone is getting the reality wrong, what is happening to the person that is next to them? Because the way that we understand reality is kind of through each other. We mirror things through each other. That's how we understand them. That's also how we understand ourselves as well. When someone treats us in a way that is read by our brains as the real version of ourselves. That's why it is important to have a good relationship with your kids, your own kids, the kids that you are taking care of, because it is very impactful in that way. And this book is talking about a different perspective of that story, how it can affect people when their loved ones is struggling with reality, what happens to the caregiver. And it was a very eye-opening book. We talked about some of the things that this book was talking about quite a lot, quite frequently in our workspace actually, but still it was very nice to see it as a book, as a written material that someone has put effort, and it was something that we were thinking about and talking about, and it was something else from the outside world. And secondly, some of the things that was mentioned throughout this book were not the things that we were really talking, or some of the things were not the things that we concluded from some of our stories. We have a different way of seeing what's happening with patients, and this writer had a different way of seeing what's happening with their patients. And because of that is why it's very eye-opening, because it helped me to see my patients and their caregivers, their relatives, in a different perspective, which was nice. The book tells a very nice narrative throughout, and it really gave me hope in my day-to-day work, so to speak. So because of that, I'm very grateful that I have read this book. This was a recommendation from one of my friends. We were going to talk about this book, but we didn't have the chance. I'm talking about it now. I think we're going to talk about different things when we get to talk about this book. This book was a very good read. I think it is second or third. Like, if I rank these books, it would be the second or third. I think I'm going to only do the top 3 in this video. And the second book that I have read this last month was The Sovereignty of Good by Iris Murdoch. I hope I pronounced that name, especially the last name. It was written by Iris Murdoch. You're going to see the book somewhere on the screen. And this book was also quite enjoyable. It was purely about philosophy, which I enjoyed. That is one of the reasons why I enjoyed the book. But it is also one of the reasons that why I didn't love it as much. It was because the language was not very familiar to me. I'm not a philosophy guy. I'm not a social sciences guy, as much as I want to be. I'm not one of them, or yet at least. I'm not trained in social sciences. I'm trained in positive sciences. That's why I don't understand it really. I don't understand these books really well sometimes, but I put some time into it, and as I read it, it was a very nice critique to the Western cultures and Western philosophy, basically. And it was like, okay, we exist, existentialism exists, okay, we understand it, but philosophy was not about this. The main question of philosophy is to find the actual truth, truth, and that is, as a philosopher or a thinker, what our main job is. That is what we should really focus on. The message of this book was mainly this, or at least the parts of that I understood was this, at least. If you're interested in this topic, which I have not done a very good job of summarizing, I suppose, but it was a very interesting read about modern society and modern way of thinking, basically, how this beneficialist, existentialist, liberalist way of living and thinking is very opposite of what philosophy really was born from. It is a very dark contrast, a very sharp contrast to what philosophy was when the ancient Greeks really developed it, and how it is a very different thing now. It is mainly talking about that, which made me really question some of the things that I go through in my day-to-day life. I think this book is going to be at the top of my it would be at the top of my list, because it also made me see how my work can be seen through a very classic philosophical lens. I understand how it would be seen, how it would be seen to be a doctor through a classical philosophical lens, because in that lens, what I do and the patient's autonomy wouldn't really matter that much. The benefit of what I'm doing would be more important in that context, which is, I think, what the old doctors and health workers, medical workers, were really advocating for. But the current way of it really changed, but I don't think we should change it back to the classical one, because even though philosophy changed, it changed in a way that was really benefit my work, or being a healthcare professional in a healthcare environment. You would really want your patient to have some autonomy so that you don't at least run into some problems. There are many different layers to that question. If the patient has autonomy, there are many layers to that question, and if we just see it through a classical lens, basically, then we are going to ignore all of it, and in reality we are going to run into so many different problems. And it really made me question some of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. That was why it was quite nice to read, and it was also quite nice to read about modern society through a different lens. Well, I have read the modern society in very different lenses, to be honest, but this lens was nice because it made me also question my existentialist or liberalist approach to my life as well. How can you think about existing or existentialism if there was a real truth in the universe? Yada yada yada. That was the main topic of that book. I quite enjoyed it, as I said. We're getting to the third book. So the name of the book, it is the Freud one. It is by Sigmund Freud, and the name is Zur Einführung der Narzissmus. I hope I said that right. I don't speak German. I took German classes for so many years, but I can't speak it. My father grew up in Germany for some years. Some of my family lives in Germany, but I can't speak German. My best friend also lives in Germany, but I can't speak it. I don't. Anyways, that's beside the point. That is the book. The book is the Freud book that is about narcissism. That's it. And it was also recommended by one of the friends that I sent a video about these books. She's a psychologist, and I was like, I want to read about psychology, please suggest me some books. And she sent me a list of 30 books, I suppose. This was one of them. This was the one that I could get to the fastest, basically. The book really changed the way I view Freud, basically. I made a video about Freud recently. I think I can make a longer one talking about, or a special one about Freud and how I viewed it and how it changed through years, because I didn't really read Freud before this year, basically, or before this last 12 months, basically. But my perception of him was quite negative before that, before I have read him or read about him. Because the funny thing is, almost all of the books that I have read this month mention Freud in one way or another, which is quite interesting. But I think I can make many videos about Freud, because I think we have an obsession with him somehow. I'm saying this in a neutral tone, by the way. The way we analyze Freud himself is very interesting, and I think there are some messages in that. And I think there are many things that show us about ourselves, how we view the reality. I think we can see some of these things reflect back to us from our analysis from Freud. And this book was very interesting in the sense that it was the first book that I have read from Freud, the first written book that was written by Freud himself. And it was a very interesting journey. The first part was I struggled to understand the first part. The same reason goes for this book as well, because it was quite theoretical. It's social sciences. I struggled to understand some of it. The second part of the book, the copy that I had, I still have it, is about the Schreber case. And the case study made me understand his theory better, because as a doctor I read a lot of case studies and I can understand them. That's how I understood his theory way better. But one surprising fact about Freud that I have learned in this book is that he redacted his first theory about hysteria not so long after he published his first article about hysteria. I didn't know that. I always thought about Freud as someone who is this person who's strongly advocating for the sexual side of life and sexual side of psychology, and how it's this very strong force of energy. I always thought of him like that, but I realized it wasn't really like that, although most of the cases that he was working on were the ones that involving some sexual imagery, to say the least. But he didn't really stood up to his first theory, which I found very interesting, because when we talk about Freud with my friends, with my colleagues, with my psychiatrist and psychologist friends, we always joke about his obsession about, genitalia, and how he, assigned intentions to each gender, basically. He didn't stand up for that theory. Not that I like Freud more now, but reading his book made me understand his theory, in the sense that this is the main message of my last video, basically. But it made me understand what he was doing is examining the 19th century Europe through a scientific lens. I think there is some neutrality there. I think we're also assigning some intention to Freud. I'm not saying his works are these very valuable things, although there are some values to them. As I mentioned, many books mention him and his works. But it is very interesting how he perceives the things that he was examining, and how he presented them, and how we see him present it. Because the things that he are presenting are very taboo and are very controversial, but he's trying to present them as neutral and as objectively as possible. But we see him through this negative image, I suppose, or that's what we do with my friends, at least. It was also eye-opening, this book was, quite frankly, and I'm glad that I have read it. I'm thankful again to my friend. I think 5 or 6 more books from Freud are on the list. I'm excited to read them, actually. I'm also excited to read Yalom. I had his book behind me in some of my past videos. I don't have it now. It is a very big one. It is up there now. I'm going to get to that, I suppose, after this summer, because this summer I am booked. I have too many books to read now. But after this summer, I think I'm going to get into some Yalom, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly as well. He's the one with the book that I have of him. I can see it actually. Is the existentialist psychotherapy. It is, right? Yeah, existentialist psychotherapy. His book is about a new way of psychotherapy, basically. As you can understand, I quite enjoy reading about psychology, although sometimes I do not really understand it that well. I spend my time to understand it somehow, and if I don't, I just don't, and I just keep it to myself. Anyways, this was my 3rd book, and the 4th book is, I can't read. Okay, this might be my favorite of this month. It is Peak Libido from Dominic Petman. Firstly, I'm going to explain the name of the book. The term peak libido is a term that the writer came up with to represent the point at which the usable libido on Earth is used up and it doesn't exist anymore. He made this term from the term peak petrol or petroleum, and I hope you know, if you don't, peak petroleum means the point at which the usable petroleum on Earth is used up. So he's using the same manner to libido, and the book is very interesting. It also mentions Freud, obviously, because it's talking about libido, but the main thing that the book is mentioning is libidinal ecology. He's taking the Freudian term of libidinal economy and it's taking it to another level. And the main premise of the book is that as humans we have these sexual acts, and these things lead to some waste. We throw out our latexes and we wash some things away with some dish soap. That is not very good for the environment, yada yada yada. The environment around us is impacted because of our sexual acts as well. As much as we don't want to see it, it's happening. And also, even though we live in a world where sexual liberation happens, there might be some exhaustion on people's libidos as we see more people supporting incel movements. Do you get what I'm saying? The book is like, the world might not be as positive to sexual acts as we think it is, or the way we approach these sexual acts might not be as beneficial as we think they are. And it is another way of reading modern society, but I think it is a very interesting, and I think everyone should read it, because it really something that you don't really think about. You do what you do, and then you throw away what you don't use anymore, and you don't really think about it, because these things are taboo. I can't say it openly on this video because I don't want to be flagged in this video. Not that I'm watched that much, but I still like not to be flagged by YouTube. Anyway, so the book is like putting these things up to your face so that you can see what's going on, and it's not really giving you a recipe to follow to be more like conscious about these things, but it is at least showing you how it is impacting the ecology. And I think it is very nice to read, and it was, like I said, it was quite an eye-opening book. It was very enjoyable, and I think I'm going to put it at the top of my lists, at the top of my list for the books that I have read for this month. We're getting at the 5th book. The book is named, okay, we're going to have some problems with the writer's name in this one. I'm going to try as much as I can, but please forgive me for mispronouncing some of the letters, I suppose. The book is The Burnout Society, and the writer is Byung-Chul Han. I hope I pronounced it correctly. If I have not, please forgive me. Anyways, the book is about how it's another read of the modern society, and the book is about how the modern society is like really focused on this fact that we should be productive, I can't speak, and very efficient. The book is centered around this thesis that we really burn ourselves out because we focus on these things. The main focus of our lives is this fact of efficiency. And I'm a Gen Z, and as I was reading this book, I was planning to take a last minute leave, and it really happened at the last minute. I asked my professor to take a leave at the last 15 minutes of our work shift, basically. And it was quite interesting. I think this book is really helpful for millennials because what I see when I see some people that are a little older than me, that they really value hard work way more than I do. I value efficient working, but I also value authenticity way more than they do. They can really put themselves down the list of priorities, and they really put their work, their job, at the top of that. The book was given to me to read. The person that gave it to me was a millennial, and I was like, this book, I'm happy that you read this book because it should be helpful to you. And he was like, yeah. It is going to be. The things that the book was pointing out were very true and very important, but I think we are in a different projection now as the generations move on. Now that the Gen Z is getting more in the workforce, I think we are seeing more authentically expressed individuals in workplaces, and who are asking for their rights in the workplace, and who are not really willing to put their everything basically so that the machine can work as well as it can be. So that book was quite valuable, I think, but I don't think some of the things it's advocating or some of the things that it's mentioning are not as important anymore. They are important, but I think we can talk about some other more important things rather than the burnout. Also, the burnout still plays a very big role in modern society, or even in younger generations, but I think it can also viewed through a different lens rather than the capitalist machine. Also, the capitalist machine has its problems as well, but I think some of the views and some of the think pieces of this book could be a little updated. Not that it's a bad book. I'm not sure when was it written. Maybe for its time it was a very important think piece, but for now, for 2026, I don't think it is really that. It is really painting a very realistic picture. I ran out of storage space in my phone. If the framing changed, please excuse me. I had to clean some space in my phone. But I was mentioning how my critique isn't that important about any of the books, at least for the last book. Like I said, I don't think what he said was wrong anyways. So the last book. And for the last book, I'm also going to talk about my story with fiction books in the last years. So the last book, it wasn't the last book, but the fiction book that I have read this month was Flesh by, I'm not going to be able to pronounce his last name, I think. David Chalet, I think, or Chalet. I think that is a British way of saying it. I think it's David Chalet. Anyways, so the story it is stressing me out. The story is very stressful. The book is about a man and start the story when he was 15 and he grows up. And when he was 15, he has some things happen to him and it causes some other things to happen, which is not nice. None of the things that happen in the book are nice, to be honest. And yeah, we follow his life. I'm not going to say how it ended, but nothing in this book is very bright, to say the least. Some parts of it are some parts of the stories taking place in Hungary and some part of it in London, which is also a very, it represents how the story goes, at least in the London part. It's quite grim. Not grim, but gloomy. I was stressed very much. The reason that I have read this book is because of Dua Lipa, actually. I have seen her in a conference have a chat with the writer of the book, and she mentioned of the book as an interesting piece on being emotionally constipated. She described the main character of the book like verbally and emotionally constipated, and I was curious about this definition and I wanted to read it, and I can in fact assure you that the main character is constipated in a way. I think it is emotional. It can also be verbal, but he really doesn't understand anything, and that is the main point of the story. He doesn't understand anything about anything, basically, and you sometimes want to pull your hair out of your head. And as you can tell, even though the other books, the read of the modern society that I live, the most stressful one was the fiction one, because the constipation part was a plus point, but the stressful part was such a huge negative that I didn't enjoy the book. It stressed me out. It was a traumatic experience. And the fact that I don't think that book the story isn't that imaginary. It can happen in this real world. And it is what's depressing me the most and what's stressing me out the most. And I think I can tell some of my friends have had some things like this happen to them. This is why I also could not watch Euphoria season 3, because I have enough stressful events in my life that I can't really afford the time to go through it in my leisure time, afford my leisure time to go through some more stress. I have it enough in my own life anyways. And this book was parallel to that. I think if I was to compare this book with the season 1 of Euphoria, no, Euphoria would win. But you could think about this book as, 3 parts of Euphoria season 1. 3 times of this book would equal to Euphoria. It is that stressful, at least in my opinion. Euphoria was that stressful to me. And this is why I don't read fiction anymore, because most of the fiction stories that come out recently are very stressful, to me at least. They are very depressing. I don't want to read about depressed things. There are enough depressed things on this earth that I don't want to go through them in my leisure time. And I find talking about the consumption of libido and how it can, go away more enjoyable than reading a book about a man's life. I think that's quite an important point to make. I think we should be really thoughtful about that. I think we should think about this, and someone should come out with a story that is fun to read. As I have looked at the book there. Oh my gosh. The stories that I had listed in my book, in my book array is they're also depressing. Or maybe someone can suggest me a very fun book to read. I'm very hungry for something fun to read. The Midnight Library was a nice one, although it involved some stressful events. But it was at least one of the best that I could find. Normal People, I think I have read last year. It was quite stressful. I wanted to scream at the main characters. But Intermezzo, Sally Rooney's other book, I also have read it last year. Was hopeful in a sense, but the story was still very stressful, so I couldn't really enjoy that either. And this is my thoughts about fiction. This whole video, this very long video, was basically about my hate towards current fiction books. Thanks for watching. If you have watched until the end, if you have not, I can understand it. But if you have, please leave a comment down below of what you think about current status of literature, or if you have any books to suggest. I'm also open, even though I have, I think, 180 books in my wish list, which is quite nice. I can add more. I'm not obligated to, or I'm not forbidden from adding more to that list. And if you like this video, if you have, you're very powerful to go through all this very long video. But if you have enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel. I have forgot the word subscribe somehow. And if you have, I will see you the next time. Please take care of yourselves. Bye.